I have a favor to ask, whether this is the first episode or the 40th you've listened to. Could you take a few moments to complete a survey on the website at conversationsoncareers.com/survey? Your feedback will help me plan future episodes and seasons of the show. This is Conversations on Careers and Professional Life, a podcast from the Foster School of Business, MBA Career Management Office. I'm your host, Gregory Heller. On each episode, I talk with guests from faculty and staff to students and business leaders about the skills and strategies that can help you design a professional life that you're happy with. On this episode, I speak with Rachel Hester. After graduating from Foster in 2018, Rachel went to work for Nike in a finance manager role. And in a little less than a year, she moved into a role in sustainability finance. I think that her experience, both in the program and after graduating, provides a great example for students who are interested in pursuing careers in sustainability or impact. Since recording this conversation in the summer of 2021, Rachel has moved on from Nike and is now working on ESG strategy and finance at VMware. I hope you enjoy this conversation on careers and professional life with Rachel Hester. Rachel, welcome to Conversations on Careers and Professional Life.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Before we get into what you're doing now and how you got there, can we rewind? Because you graduated in the class of 2018.
Yes.
So 3 years ago, you started a role at Nike. But what were you doing in 2016 before you came to Foster?
That's a great question. And I, like many other students who have come to Foster, I took a hard career pivot. Before I started my MBA, I was actually in marketing and communications. So I was working for a media company on the East Coast. We had local news, we had entertainment websites, et cetera. And I was the consumer marketing manager. So I was managing launching new apps and communications out, email marketing, social media marketing, even print marketing at the time. So very, very different, but still had a lot of great skills that came out of that experience.
And remind me, when you came to Foster, did you know that you wanted to pursue a career in sustainability, or was that an interest that developed during your time in the program?
Yeah, thanks for asking me that question. That's just like a fun story for me to tell. I actually went to Foster specifically because I wanted to pivot into sustainability. And at the time, I didn't know how I would turn a career in marketing into sustainability, right? And I was ready to take my career to the next level. And one of the reasons I looked at Foster is because I thought it would be a great opportunity within sustainability. It was located on the West Coast, had a lot of great relationships with companies that were leading the area of sustainability in a corporate sense. And so that's really what drew me to Foster. But when I came, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I know that's something we'll probably get into later in the podcast, but I just knew that Foster would help me get there. I just didn't know exactly what that path was going to be.
When did you land on finance?
Yeah. So when I first came into my MBA and I knew I wanted to do sustainability, finance was not even on my radar. And having been in marketing before, I didn't really have a lot of experience with finance. I had managed a marketing budget, and that was the extent of my finance experience. As I started to look through different functions that I thought I could carve this career path in sustainability, a few things came to mind, such as pretty naturally operations, right? You think operations and logistics, moving things around the planet takes a lot of carbon and there's waste and packaging, et cetera. And while I found that interesting, it just didn't feel like it was exactly the right path for me. And I was still looking around, and I started taking the required finance courses and really enjoyed those. I mean, I think we have some really amazing finance professors at Foster that garnered in me an interest in finance that I didn't even know was there. I wouldn't even consider myself someone who really liked numbers, honestly, before I came to get my MBA. But I just slowly started to realize that sustainability decisions are finance decisions at the end of the day. When you think from a corporate lens, so many times we're thinking, what's the highest ROI, project that we can invest in, right? What's going to bring on the most value back to the company? And I think sustainability has a different lens you have to think about, right? There's dollars are not the only ROI, but it certainly drives a lot of the decision making. And so that's what really got me thinking, like, maybe finance is a place where I could be part of that decision making around sustainability, and started getting into that deeper and deeper, taking more and more finance classes. And before I know it, I know we don't have specific specializations, but I feel like I had created a specialization for myself within sustainability and finance.
Beyond the core classes in finance, what were some of the finance electives that you think really gave you the skills to succeed in this role?
I would say there was a mix of finance and non-finance courses, actually. I took Lance Young's entrepreneurial finance or entrepreneurship finance. I can't remember exactly what it was called,
Yep.
but that was just an amazing course to begin with. And to think about, how do you value a company? How do you, essentially, we were creating like financial models in some sense, right? Even though we didn't necessarily call it that. That just got me thinking, how can I use finance as a tool and a practical application, which is what I do in my day-to-day job now, right? And another elective I took was with international economics. That was something else interesting that I hadn't thought about before. Like, how do you think about exchange rates, and how does what happened in China affect our business here and in the US, right? So that was something that I just hadn't thought about economics maybe on that scale before. You take macro and you take micro, but you're not necessarily thinking about how economics between countries affects the global economy. So I think that was really helpful, because honestly, sustainability is quite a global area of practice, right? What happens here affects other places. What happens other places affects wherever you're doing business. So it's not something that can be done in isolation. And then another class that I took that was just, I'm going to forget the name of it. Maybe we can, I
I'll
could,
look it up and we'll stick it
yeah,
in there. Yeah.
it was the entrepreneurial class with Greg, who started Rover. I can't remember what was the name of this course, but essentially it took you through as if you were launching your own startup, right? How do you think about, like, what is your idea, and how do you find a market for it? What does that target consumer want? How do you put together a pitch? How are you going to make this work financially? Like, just soup to nuts. And then at the very end of the course, of course, you're like pitching your idea to actual VC investors. So I think that was just like a crash course in things that you need to know in sustainability, which is, sustainability projects, sometimes they are something that haven't been done before, especially at established companies, or you're thinking about, how can I make this work financially? Like, we know it's the right thing to do for the environment, but like, we also need to make it work financially, right? And I think that having that startup mindset kind of puts you in that aspect of like, this is the exciting thing that I love, or this new idea that I want to make work. How can I make it work so that it's financially viable? And I think when you are working in corporations and sustainability, that is something you really need to think about, right? I don't think anyone within a company doesn't look at a sustainability project and say like, oh, that's cool, or we really want to do that. But at the end of the day, you do have to find a way to make it work. So I think that was something that really helped shape my thinking in another way.
So let's talk about what you do at Nike.
Mhm.
And this was not your first role at Nike. Wasn't the role that you got coming out of
Yeah,
Foster. So
it
tell
was.
us a little bit about that evolution or transition.
Yeah. So coming out of Foster, I think Nike, like a lot of other places, you get an offer for a job title, not necessarily a specific role. So I was offered a finance manager position. And even in my interviews, I was talking about my passion for sustainability. And I think Nike did a good job of trying to place people in open roles in areas that they did have an interest in. So my first role was within global operations finance. It was more of a portfolio role. So managing all of the teams that make up global operations at Nike. That's about 10 teams. And one of them was sustainability. So I did have that kind of initial, more high level, slightly removed experience with sustainability at Nike. But it was a great foundational role. Like I said, I was in marketing before. I'd never done finance. So to walk into a company, into a truly finance role, I think it was a great way for me to get the foundations of finance that I needed to then take the role that I have now as sustainability finance manager. So as I thought about that kind of transition, I knew I wanted to get into sustainability. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, and truthfully, it was just a little bit of luck. The sustainability team had a bit of a reorg. The finance position became open because I had been so vocal. I think I was actually asked, like, do you want to interview for this position? I was like, absolutely. So I went through the process, and I was lucky to end up have gotten the role. And for the last 2 years, it was been such a interesting opportunity, but I would almost even say a blessing because I've gotten to really shape the role into something new as sustainability continues to evolve at Nike and at corporations, I would say everywhere. I definitely feel the speed of sustainability's evolution picking up in the last year or so.
So let me unpack that for a moment, right? What you said there is you took this general role as
Mhm.
finance manager. That's sort of how large companies recruit out of MBA programs. You
Mhm.
don't necessarily know which team you're going to be on right away. And once you got into Nike, you made sure that everybody knew that your passion was sustainability, that your long term career goal was sustainability, and you had some visibility into this sustainability team because of the role that you had.
Right.
And then when an opportunity arose on that team, everybody thought of you, pretty
Yeah, and
much.
I would say that that's some of the best advice I can give if you're thinking about a sustainability career path is really to be vocal with your passion because I'll be honest, I don't think it's easy to go and get a role that has the title sustainability in it coming right out of an MBA or just like in general to get a sustainability specific role. But being vocal about it once you get in the company is huge because often sustainability roles become, at least in my experience, are really specific to that company, right? Like you need to understand that company. For certain roles, you'll just excel, right? You don't necessarily, because you need to be an expert in your function, of course, like whatever that is, operations, it's finance, it's marketing, et cetera. But then you also need to understand what is your company doing around sustainability to then excel. So be vocal be vocal with anyone who will listen, like when you're going to get your MBA. Like I said, I even talked about it in my interview. And then as you're having conversations with people, reach out to people on the sustainability team, at whatever company you end up joining, right? Have those conversations. Talk about it to your manager. I certainly did. Talk about it to your manager's manager. I certainly did. And that's a way for people to, like you said, to think of you when these opportunities come up, because the truth is there's just not that many opportunities, right? So you want to be top of mind when they do arise.
So you mentioned developing expertise, obviously in the functional area like finance or marketing or operations, right? Are there ways that you sought to develop expertise in sustainability specifically
During my time at
during your
Foster.
time at Foster or once you'd started at Nike? Were there things that you were
Yeah.
doing to like understand what what are the issues of sustainability that intersect with finance? And are there I
Yeah.
know that there are things like full life cycle analysis,
Mhm.
carbon accounting, right? Are there things like that that you made sure that you were continuing your professional development on so that you would be prepared for a role in sustainability?
Yes, absolutely. During my time at Foster, I think it's easier as you're going through an MBA program because there's so many different opportunities that are available to you. I focused my internship around sustainability. I did an applied elective with the local startup that was focused on sustainability. I was the co president of Net Impact. I did a sustainability case competition. Like I did anything that I could with my time so that I could get some like quote stories right around sustainability that I could talk about as I was going on, and it was just really great learning experiences if nothing else. And then once you get into the working world again, of course I was focused on developing functionally because that what had been a switch for me into finance. But there's so many areas within sustainability that are developing right now. For instance, I took the SASB test, which is Sustainability Accounting Standards Board test. And that just helps you to understand more around ESG, so environmental, social, and governance, right? That's a very hot topic within finance. There's all kind of certifications you can get, but just having that continuous learning and staying abreast of the issues is, I think, really, really important, right? Because when you are going into a company, like with something as specific as sustainability, you and those other folks that are on the sustainability team, like you are the experts at your company, right? So like you have to remember that people are coming to you for this information and they're looking for to you to understand what is happening on the cusp of sustainable finance, for example, or what's happening in operations. So I think for me it's exciting because I enjoy this, right? Like I've dedicated my professional life to this, but definitely something that there are plenty of opportunities in whatever path that you take to continue your education.
So you identified some of the curricular activities
Mhm.
and now some of the extracurriculars like case competition, your internship, and another applied project that you did. If I remember correctly, your internship was also a little bit non-traditional, not just in that it was in sustainability. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and how it maybe set you up to have this career in sustainability finance?
Sure. So my internship was definitely not traditional. It's with a company probably no one recognizes, but it's actually here in Seattle. It's Umbra Custinetti, excuse me. It's an Italian company that supplied parts for Boeing and essentially parts that can't fail. So if you think about an airplane, there's certain parts that just can never fail throughout the life of an airplane. And that's what they did. That's what they specialized in. And they had some thoughts around where they wanted to take new areas of the company, specifically within renewable energy. Because if you think about things like windmills, for an example, right? There's certain parts, sorry, wind turbines, not windmills, wind turbines, there's certain parts that can't ever fail throughout the life of that turbine. So we took a look into this renewable energy sector. It was me and two other Foster students. I thought it was super interesting because we had a really innovative, I would say, just innovative manager who he thought kind of beyond the scope of anything I would have ever thought. And he really let us run with it. We used all kind of different things as we were brainstorming, trying to think of like, what could the market be? What could this company even produce for this market, et cetera. We used design thinking. That was something that I think is now it's been around for many years. I think more people are aware of it, but even at the time when I was doing this 4 years ago, it still felt like it was pretty new. And so we used that. I think design thinking in general is great for sustainability, right? You're just kind of thinking through problems in a new way and making sure that you keep the user of whatever it is that you're producing at the forefront of that process. So yeah, it ended up being a great summer experience. And I was apprehensive at first, honestly, to not just take a typical path, right? Like I could have gone and gotten a finance internship role at a large company, but I was really adamant on I wanted to have sustainability experience on my resume before I left the MBA. So I think it was a good experience for me, and I used that experience as I interviewed even for a finance manager role.
I think it buried in there is a good piece of advice, and that's having that North Star, if you will,
Mhm.
or that really clear objective and developing it perhaps while you're in the program or before you get into the
Mhm.
program, and knowing what experiences you want to get into your
Mhm.
portfolio of experience while in the program, because it is such a fantastic opportunity to try out new roles, to explore new industries. And again, as you said, some people come into the program really wanting to have that Fortune 500 or Fortune
Mhm.
100 company name on their resume, and others come into the program knowing that they want to have a particular type of experience, and figuring that out for yourself sounds like it was pretty important and ultimately instrumental in the trajectory of your career.
I would definitely say that, and anyone who's really passionate around sustainability, social impact, any of these spheres, like you have to keep that North Star. If you don't, it's so easy to go off down a different path. And not that there's anything wrong with those paths, right? But if that's not your passion and that's not really what you want to be doing for the rest of your life, you have to keep that forefront as your North Star. And there isn't a traditional career path for sustainability. You're going to have to deviate from your peers, which if you're kind of the type A MBA personality, which I am, and a lot of people who go back to get their MBA are, it's hard. It's hard to deviate off of that path and say, you know what, I'm not, to your point, I'm not going to take the Fortune 100 company internship because this other thing, having sustainability experience, is more important to me. Or I'm not going to follow, you know, like all of my peers who I really admire and they're doing really amazing things. And instead, maybe I'm going to go over here and do this thing where I don't even know what the next step is necessarily because there's not a whole lot of people doing it. So I think it is important. Like if this is your passion, you have to think, keep it, as you said, keep it as your North Star, but you also have to think longer term. You have to say, where am I wanting my career to be in 10 years? Whereas most people are saying, what's the next job role that I want to have and what do I need to do to get there? I think with sustainability, you often have to say, like, what do I want to do a decade from now? And is this next opportunity in front of me? Can I see the path to get me to where I need to be in 10 years? Because if you're just only looking for the next opportunity, it can become really confusing because the next opportunity is not always obvious. Because the next opportunity is, you're not going to be a sustainability analyst and then a sustainability manager and then a sustainability director, right? You might, but that's probably unusual. You're going to have to go and find your and make your own path in that way.
Are there trends that you're seeing now that you've been in this role for 2 years? Are there trends you're seeing in sustainability that you think current students or incoming students should be aware of as they think about a career in this realm?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really exciting time if you are pivoting your career or just starting a new career within sustainability because there's so many new areas that are becoming not just important in this realm but are translating into jobs. If you're interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, like I think that I didn't used to see those as job titles, or maybe it was like one, right? And now there's entire teams being built out around that. Biodiversity is kind of a new and interesting area. I never heard biodiversity being talked about from a corporate sustainability lens, years ago. And now it's something that's coming to the forefront because the science is there, right? But if that's something you're interested in and you're starting out now, I think you could go build a career off of that likely. ESG, obviously, I'm in the finance space. I think ESG has been around for a while, but the speed at which it's coming up in conversations for like earnings calls, investor relations conversations, that it's really not just a topic that gets asked about once in a while, but it is the topic that investors and analysts are wanting to discuss. I think that that's huge. At the same time, and probably naturally, the standards around sustainability disclosures, right? So, how do you talk about sustainability in financial and non-financial ways? Those standards, they're trying to converge. There's a lot of different standards out there, but I think once you get to a standard that is either required or just the accepted standard, like ESG will just again continue to take off. And I also kind of see, just in general, there's a lot of specialist functions coming up around sustainability, right? Like maybe the marketing team used to just do any type of marketing or communications, sustainability was in there. Now you have people specific to sustainability communications and sustainability marketing. So again, I think we talked about a little bit earlier, but finding your focus, whether that's like an issue, like maybe you're really passionate about water, or it's an industry like me, like you could be really passionate about footwear and apparel, or you could also be really just gung ho about a certain function. Maybe it's marketing, but you need to find your focus. And I think the trends are all, at least in my opinion, pointing, if you do find that focus, there are going to be opportunities there for you.
What are some of the kind of projects that you work on? Obviously, without divulging things that you can't divulge, but like, what's the nature of the work that you do?
That's a great question. I get asked this a lot, and the truth is there's, I guess now probably two people that actually have sustainable finance in their title at Nike, even if there's more obviously who are working in this area. So basically, on a day to day case, there's a lot of different things I could be doing, but some things that I think are interesting and enjoy the most is like creating financial models around sustainability projects, right? So when we're thinking about entering into either like just a new project or even like a new business model, we want to know the outcome of that, right? And I think the interesting thing about sustainability is that typically in finance, you're looking over maybe a couple of years, but probably just the next year if you're looking at making an investment in a project. With sustainability, I'm always looking at a longer time horizon. So as you're building models, like it's just really interesting to think about what is the business going to look like in 5+ years, right? So I might be working on a financial model for a new sustainable packaging project as an example, or at a little bit more of a portfolio level, we have lots of different sustainability initiatives across the enterprise. So like a lot of Fortune 100 companies, Nike has external sustainability targets, right? And so this is something that we announce. Nike does it through an impact report, but it's something that's out there. It's something that the public looks at. It's certainly something that like investors and analysts are looking at. And you need to know from a finance angle, like if you're signing up for these targets, what does that mean for the company from a financial lens? Like, right? Like, are you changing the P&L, or how is this going to affect how we're thinking about making investments 5 years from now? Because you're signing up for a target now, right? For something that's going to come to fruition in 5 or more years. So I think like thinking at that portfolio level of how is the business going to change, what work is driving us meeting this target? How does that change how we think about, which investments need to be priority over the next however many years? It's really exciting stuff, and I get to work with a lot of people across the enterprise, really. And I've learned so much just kind of sitting in this central role and being able to look across the company. Typically, when you're in a finance role, you're not necessarily looking at the entire P&L. So I think sustainability is a really fun place to be in finance because you do get to take that full P&L look as well.
Are there business press resources that you read to stay up to date on what other companies are doing in the sustainability space?
Yeah, you know what I have found to be the best resource for finding this type of information is I follow people on LinkedIn. So I follow, you know, chief sustainability officers or just companies in general that I think are really interesting in this space. And of course, they, post to their LinkedIn what they're doing. And I have found out about so much stuff that wouldn't necessarily be written about in the news. And I think it's an amazing way to kind of understand like what's on the cusp, what's happening also like on the ground, right? So I feel like a lot of times with some publications, you either have things that are more theoretical, there's not a whole lot of practical applications, or you have things that are pretty broad and maybe you already knew about it. So I feel like LinkedIn is a sweet spot where it's, it's the cusp of what's happening, but it's also practical application, or they wouldn't be announcing it on LinkedIn.
Do you have any recommendations in terms of books
Hmm.
that you read or are reading that have helped you think about this space?
Yeah. I read a small, short book during my MBA that, I don't say this lightly, but honestly changed the way that I think. Um, and that was Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. I think if you're starting out in sustainability, just having this book as a resource and going back to it, I certainly go back to it over and over again as a reminder. I would say like everyone should have that on their nightstand if they're interested in sustainability. But that is an older book, but the truth is thinking in systems doesn't change a whole lot. Once you learn how to think in systems, you get it. Another one I've read recently that I thought was awesome was Donut Economics by Kate Rayworth. And she's an economist, like classically trained. But what I thought was so interesting is as she went through school, and she talks about this in her book, as she was going through like the best, economic schools and universities in the world, getting her PhD, she just realized that there was entire parts of economics that she didn't agree with, or she felt that we're missing the point a little bit. And I think if anyone's in sustainability, like you've probably had these same thoughts, right? Exponential growth is not something that is sustainable. And I don't even mean that in an environmental way. It's just impossible. You can't have exponential growth forever. Nowhere in nature do we find exponential growth. However, all of our kind of economics and theories and systems and what we're striving for, our goals, is exponential growth forever, right? So that's just kind of a basic mismatch. And I think that book does a really great job of providing an alternative to that. That's not just like, get rid of capitalism, because that doesn't exactly work either, right? So I think that's a great one. And if you just want like a lighter summer read, I think Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, I really enjoyed that book as well. And it's more just about connecting with nature and the lessons you can learn from nature.
And I'll put links to all those in the show notes.
Awesome.
Do you listen to any podcasts on the topics?
I do. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I would say I have really specific interests in some ways. So I listen to Sustainable World Radio. It's really about ecology and permaculture. It's just something I find fascinating, and I garden, so it's just something that I enjoy. And I also listen to Green Beauty Conversations, which for women in general, right, we just use a lot more products that tend to have chemicals in it that we probably shouldn't be like consuming through our skin every day. So that's something that I've gotten into recently. And like I even make my own kind of skincare. But the reason that I'm saying all this is just there's so many podcasts out there. Like you can find your niche and what you're interested in. And it doesn't even necessarily like have to be related to your career. Like neither of those things I'm trying to make a career out of, right? But it's something that keeps me close to sustainability. And I end up learning a lot of interesting things that sometimes do apply to what I'm doing at work.
During your time at Foster, obviously I'm on the career management team.
Yes.
What were some of the resources that you found most helpful in your career exploration and preparing you for the interview process? What were some of the resources that you think students really should know about and pay attention to?
Yeah, that's a great question. The professional development class that we had, I think it's in the very first quarter. The first quarter can be so overwhelming with everything else you have going on that it can just feel like the class that, it's not as hard, right? You're not like trying to learn an entire new subject, right? Like, and anyone who's gotten into the MBA has already interviewed and done these things. But I think really taking it seriously as if it is its own discipline was helpful. There's just so much to be learned around how to give a really great interview. And as you're leaving the MBA and you're trying to get these jobs that are honestly on a new career level than you had before you came into the MBA, right? Like there are expectations about how you show up in an interview. So I think as silly as it is, like the STAR method, like drilling the STAR method into a situation, task, action, result. Now, every single interview I go into when I get one of those questions, I'm like ticking it off in my head and I can be a lot more concise, right? And say what I want to say. And same thing with case prep. I think if you really get into case prep, even if not all jobs require case interviews, right? But if you can nail a really good case interview, you've pretty much prepared. That's like the hardest interview you can prepare for, right? You've pretty much prepared for any interview situation you're going to be in between those two things, STAR and case prep. And I would also say the applied strategy project was really, really helpful. I did a sustainability project on with Amazon. And that was just a really, really great experience and something that I certainly probably would not have been able to do on my own, right? To get Amazon to allow me to peek behind the curtain and work in some sustainability areas. So that was really nice.
There's one question that I usually like to ask students, and it's, now you're a couple years out, right? You have more wisdom than you had when you came into the program. Is there something you wish you knew when you started that you know now? That like if you could rewind and you could just whisper it in your ear and be like, oh, wow, that just changed the course of everything. Is there anything like that for you?
Well, that's very gracious that you think I'm this much wiser 3 years later. Thank you. I would say for me, I think I would just go back and tell myself that it's going to be okay. I think I had so much self-doubt going into an MBA program where I was trying to carve a path that I didn't know what it was. And I my entire life, I feel like I followed the script, right? Like get good grades in high school to get into college, get good grades in college, do your internships to get your good first job, like work hard at your first job and make your way up and then go back to school. So it's just like always following the steps in front of you. And once I made the choice, like, you know what, I really want my career to be in sustainability, I had to start being okay with the fact that there's no more script for me to follow. And I have to write my own script. And I think I would just go back to myself and say, like, calm down, you're going to be okay. It's fine. And you know what? I find it really freeing. I like not knowing that I'm going to have this exact, job title and be doing this exact work in 5 to 10 years, right? I think that it's freeing. It gives you opportunities to try new things that maybe would have been off of your prescribed path.
Sounds like some solid advice.
I wish I had it at the time, and I probably need to continue to calm down.
Yeah, right. You can keep reminding yourself of
Yes.
it. Write it on a sticky note.
Exactly.
I think you've provided some excellent insights for students interested in careers in sustainability and how you got to where you are. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me for this conversation on careers and professional life.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it and I appreciated your time as well.
I think there are 3 key takeaways from my conversation with Rachel. First, be vocal about your passion. If you want to work in sustainability, especially at a larger company, sustainability might not be in that first role or title. But when you get that job, let anyone and everyone know what your interests are, and you can start that even while you're at Foster. Second, get sustainability experience during your time in the program. Internships, case competitions, applied projects, and things of that nature can go a long way to preparing you for full-time roles with sustainability in them. Third, identify your North Star. Developing a framework to guide the decisions you'll make during the program and stay focused on what your goal is. This is one of the reasons why we take all of our students through some design thinking exercises based on the book and curriculum of Designing Your Life, which comes out of the D.school at Stanford during our orientation programming. As always, you can find links to the books, podcasts, and other resources Rachel and I discussed on the website at conversationsoncareers.com. While you're there, I'd appreciate a few moments of your time to take a short survey. Your feedback will help me plan the next season of the podcast. Click on the survey link in the right-hand side. Thank you for listening to another episode of Conversations on Careers and Professional Life. I'd love to hear what you think about the podcast. You can email me at gheller@uw.edu. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or classmate.
I was going to say your speech thing was really helpful just on how to present yourself better, which is huge, I would say, throughout my career. I still remember you recording us, and that was like the most painful exercise for me to watch myself recorded, but it was really helpful, really helpful.